Bruce C.T. Wright. I'm the managing editor of NewsOne.com. And here's our truth. Racism is literally destroying us. But the injustices are layered. Every day, many of us go to work in spaces where we're passed over for promotions, subjected to racially insensitive commentary, and are paid less for the same work. Many companies are finally talking change, and we're talking how. News One has partnered with 100 Black men of America to present solutions from corporate America, how brands are using their voice to empower Black communities. This discussion is part of a series on the impact of corporate support against injustice and the anti-racism movement. Please watch, join the conversation, and stay connected to News One, and share your thoughts by following us on Facebook at News One Official, Twitter at News One, and Instagram at News1_official. And keep watching.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third and final installment of Solutions from Corporate America, a conversation series that brings together leaders from across disciplines to have a conversation about how brands can use their influence to advance initiatives in Black communities. My name is Jason Rosario, and I am the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at BBDO Worldwide. I'm also the founder and executive director of The Lives of Men. I am pleased and honored to be joined by two amazing leaders in their own right, John Belay and Tristan Walker, who I'll let introduce themselves in a minute. But I just want to give a quick shout out to News One and 100 Black Men for hosting this conversation series and allowing us the space and the platform to have these all important conversations. So without further ado, Tristan, John, thank you for joining me. Let's get right into it. John, I want to start with you. Can you share a little bit about who you are and your background and the work that you do with Not Standard with the audience, please?
Of course, Jason, thanks for having me and for putting this panel together. Excited to be here today. So Not Standard, as a business, we make custom menswear for gentlemen to go to work, right? So as much as we talk about, our casual offering and everything that you guys can see online, like it is workwear, and it's to empower people and to ultimately provide confidence, right? So when I think about kind of my role, I've been 10 years in seat as CEO, and the initial kind of idea was, could you create a way to provide custom clothing at an affordable rate to people to give them confidence in their daily job and to make them better when they left the store than before when they came in. And that seeded what was ultimately a bigger mission, a bigger company, and really the journey that is Not Standard, which is based here in New York with showrooms across 10 U.S. cities and continuing to add things day by day. So excited to be here and to be a part of the discussion, Jason and Tristan.
Thank you, John. And as a lover of #menswear, I can appreciate your work.
You're in good company. You're in good company.
Tristan Walker.
Hey, everybody. I'd like to describe my work and I think my mission really to be centered around the intersection of three things. First, the importance and criticality of the demographic shift happening in this country, right? And the cultural influence of people of color around the world, particularly Black folks. Second, the importance and influence of technology on companies, but also the unseen, right, or forgotten. And then lastly, brands. I love great brands, not because they're just great brands, but because they can be a force for good in the world. And a lot of the work that I've done, again, sits at the intersection of, I think, those three things. So I'm the founder and CEO of Walker & Company. I found the company I founded back in 2013 with the aim to make health and beauty simple for people of color. We're building a family of brands focused on the unique needs of this community. The brand that we're most well known for is a brand called Bevel, kind of head to toe grooming solution for men, particularly Black men. It was acquired by Procter & Gamble in 2018, and I'm still running the company as CEO since that acquisition. Also sit on the boards of both Foot Locker and Shake Shack. Also, two companies that I believe sit at the intersection of those three things.
Yeah, I can tell you that you can thank my nice shiny head to the Bevel razor. So I'm a proud customer. You both are doing great work, and I want to get right into the conversation. So But I want to start macro first. So can you share with us kind of how recent and past events have impacted you personally and professionally? And what's your takeaway from everything that's been happening this year in particular? And so, namely COVID, namely racial and social injustice, the social political climate that we're living in, all of it.
Yeah, Tristan, if you want, I'll start with a big open-ended question, Jason. But I think a lot of good talking points. Um, when we think about, I guess what the media has talked about first in order, right, is this COVID came like a freight train for all of us in the month of, call it March, late February, right? Just by the headlines, and that has changed, I think, everything that we knew, and everything that we took for granted in our life. Like, this can all be taken away in just an instant, right? People that ran beautiful hotels, great businesses, great restaurants, like it was all taken away. And so, as someone that runs a business that relies on all types of consumers and people from all walks of life, from all different cities, we felt that both on a personal level through client relationships, and then on a business level as well. So if you take everything that has occurred there and put it on the side, the environment around all of the racial injustice in the United States, and the discussion that it's currently now getting, I think everyone is under the feeling this has been long overdue, right? And so for us as a business, what we thought is, okay, the discussion is here and it's now. We need to take a minute, pause, look around at who's in the room at our company, and find what is our biggest muscle to drive change, right? What's the biggest muscle that we have at Not Standard, a company that makes clothes, to actually drive change? I'm sure those are points that we'll dive into later today. But in the trajectory of kind of what has occurred over the last really 7 months and hundreds of years, it's been a heavy run here in recent months.
Yeah, look, I mean, our team has been on lockdown since the first week of March. The first thing that I learned, and particularly as it relates to my leadership, is that it's required an expansion for my capacity for empathy in ways that I would have never anticipated previously. I think I lead fairly empathetically, but this has required an expansion of that, again, capacity quite significantly. And the reason is because look, I have a company that's majority folks of color, positions of leadership, majority Black women in positions of leadership. There are two global pandemics going on right now: COVID-19, persistent racism. Before we are employees, we are people first. We are sons, we are daughters, we are mothers, right? We are brothers, we're cousins. And it's important that we create space for people to take care of themselves, right? One of the first things I had to think about was the fact that I have two boys at home. They have to go to school. I need time during the day, right, to give them what they need, right? And so do other folks on my team. And our schedules aren't always in sync, right? So how can I help inspire the rest of the team to be empathetic for the situation of other folks on the team? And kind of in my management of the entire team, I had to be aware. And that awareness is something that I like to think I had, but I really had to have it. And there was no excuse to not have it throughout this entire experience, just because we are so disproportionately impacted by those things, given the representation of our organization.
Yeah, I mean, such important work. I mean, all of us are having to reconsider our leadership styles, but more importantly, our humanness and how we're showing up in this moment as human beings. So I want to go back quickly to the summer when right post George Floyd happened, we saw the rise in civil unrest, and then we saw a subsequent flurry of public statements of support made by a plethora of agencies and brands, et cetera. And so, obviously that was met with mixed results. I'm curious to hear from your perspectives, what actions and what steps are your specific companies taking to identify and then address issues of systemic racism or systemic inequality in Black communities, and to the extent that might have been difficult, where have those challenges existed, and how are you overcoming them?
Yeah, I'm happy to get started. I mean, for me, I think there's only one way to get this done, right? And that one way has three steps. First, it requires an acknowledgement of the trauma. Um, look, there have been 400 plus years of physical and emotional trauma that this community has faced consistently still to this day, right? Without an acknowledgement, a clear, transparent acknowledgement, you can't do anything, right? The second step is once you've acknowledged that trauma, you really have to model the way, right? How do you model the way? Well, you have to really clearly lay out and define what your values are. Hopefully your company's values and your own personal values are the same. That's the case that I like to think for my company. And the wonderful thing about values, it forces you to pick a side. In times like this, you have to pick a side. The equivocation stuff is it's silly, it's dead on arrival, and has no place for the action that leads me into step three: act. Right. And this goes back to what I said a little earlier. We have a load of consumers. We have a number of employees who reflect the diversity of the folks who are disproportionately impacted by these things. We have to treat our consumers like humans. Humans first, consumers second. Humans first, employees second. Right. So what can we do to actually help support them in their own lived experience? An example of that, which I was really excited about after I kind of gave the team this mandate, was look, we have to, in acknowledgement of that trauma, we have to also deal with it, right? So we partnered with the kind of mental health app Headspace to offer kind of free subscriptions to the community, right? Whether they're consumers or not, right? We're a personal care brand. Self-care is a part of that. So is mental health. It only made sense, right? But there was a requirement of our acknowledging that humanness first in order to get to an action that is investment mindset as opposed to kind of statements or donations that have no return to the benefit of this community.
I love that. I mean, what you just said, right? That's just the last piece, which is it's adopting an investment mindset, not a donation, charitable mindset. So I love that. How about you, John?
Yeah, great answer, Tristan. It sounds like you guys have done some big things. For us, what I was super conscious of, kind of from the onslaught is, we as a younger business, maybe a year older than Tristan's, like we have a lot of ideas that we get excited about internally on the business front, and then the follow through kind of falls dead, right? Because it's like, hey, we have this new thing, this new idea, and conscious of that kind of startup culture that lives within organizations. We said, hey, we're going to approach this differently, right? Because like this has to be something that is here, till the infinity of the company. So we took a not so dissimilar plan. It starts with the acknowledgement. It's everyone kind of has their synonym, but like acknowledgement internally, this cannot stand, and we as a business are going to dedicate ourselves personally and on the corporate side to driving change. And so the two steps from there that we took was we're going to plan, we're going to execute plan, and then we're going to talk about it every single week, right? So for us, the planning meant kind of huddling internally. Like we know who we are internally across 10 different cities, but are there people that want to take kind of a bigger role in this, right? So we did a company survey. We built a group internally that we call Black Joy, which is representative of not only African Americans in our company, but anyone that wants to join and come in and be a part of the change. And so in building these groups, we said, all right, what can we stick to over the long term? What is something that we know is enough in the DNA of the business that we can execute time and time again? And that was all around, hey, changing people's image and driving confidence and trying to give things to them that are kind of lasting and have staying power. That's what we do every single day, 365 days a year anyways, right? So if we put an initiative that was woven in the values of the fabric, specifically around driving confidence and helping develop talent internally with our own values and externally, then we'll have a formula for repeatable success. And so when 100 Black Men of America came as a suggestion from our internal group, and we were lucky enough to be able to talk directly with John and talk about what their mission was, and in fact we had overlapping cities. It was, hey, we start small and we stay consistent, and as we do this over time and over the years, people look back and say, hey, that's a body of work to be proud of, and it's at that point in time that you talk about it. So that's the stance that we took. Not so dissimilar from some things you heard from Tristan, but I think the consistency for us is really the biggest part.
John, and that's a great segue to my next question. And I want to stick with you for a minute because, you Not Standard made a statement back in the summer And I'm going to quote it here, but it was a statement condemning inequality and systemic racism. It said, "Our company and leadership pledges to be active contributors to long-term change to help combat this injustice." And so you mentioned the partnership with 100 Black Men. Can you share a little bit more about the granular, the details
Yeah.
around the initiative?
Yeah, and I love to, and I'll say one level before that, which I think is as you look internally, and before we can go out and be representatives of ourselves and 100 Black Men, you look at who are the people representing your company on a daily basis, right? So this room that I'm sitting in right now in our office is an appointment room that people come in and get fit for clothing, year round. So we have the opportunity across a sales force of 100 people to basically say that, hey, you as a representative of our company have the ability to be better yourself, right? So what does that mean? That means learning who's inside your company. It means all of the diversity inclusion training that you've heard about we have to do and finish and have 100% compliance as a business. And we have to have an internal panel within our Black Joy group to talk about what it's like at our company and where the fairness exists and doesn't exist. And on the back end of that, we've earned the right to basically say, hey, let's start consistent action because we're good with who we are and we feel that we have a moral compass, that can last throughout the terms of the partnership. And so, in the granularity of the suggestions of working with John 100 Black Men of America, it all started with I think the big fall conference, which has been postponed and canceled as most things are, and we said, all right, well, what can we do virtually to kick things off, right? And so we have a whole host of donations and garments here that we're working on with separate organizations. And in addition to these clothes that we can donate as samples and otherwise, let's run seminars with some of the with high school students that basically need direction, right? They need direction on how to dress, how to put themselves together, how to get ready for college, how to get ready for job interviews, et cetera. And so running these kind of Saturday sessions, and Austin is the seed market for this, but running these Saturday sessions where you can talk to a handful of individuals about here's how to put yourself together for a job interview, here's how to put yourself together for a public event, is our first bite of the apple of what will become a longer term thing across multiple markets, as we try and make a bigger footprint than Austin, Texas, and New York City.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Tristan, I want to come to you because as you've been very vocal in the press and social media about the ways that people have shown up for the Black community as it relates to these issues. And so as a Black male CEO specifically, who has created a company directly servicing Black men, how has your strategy, if at all, how has it changed given that, a lot of this civil unrest has been in large part due to the killing of unarmed Black men in the street and women. But given your profile, is that any consideration at all?
Strategy hasn't changed at all. Yeah, we started the company to sell shaving products, but at the end of the day, that would have been boring for me to do it alone, right? I wanted to build something that celebrates the uniqueness of the Black community, full stop. I had an interview about a month ago or so, a television interview with Bloomberg Television, and the host, Emily Chang, interviewed us talking about kind of some of these same issues that we're talking about right now. And she said, Tristan, do you feel that things have changed, right? Are you optimistic for the future? And I replied to Emily. I said, Emily, you were my first interview ever. She was literally my first TV interview ever 10 years ago. I said, do you remember that first interview? And she said, yeah. And I said, you remember what we were talking about during that interview? And she said these exact same things. So the reason our strategy hasn't changed is because others haven't yet, right? And our motivation, right, to really step out front and celebrating the uniqueness of this community, we want to go out loud with our megaphones there. So by the time, it's somewhat almost, it's sad to say when kind of all the social strife and injustices have started to really come to a head, it's hard to say that we were prepared to continue to lead out front there. It's unfortunate to have to say that, right? But this is not new. This is not new. And I think it's a big reason why we're so quick to offer support, not only for our people, and I mean that kind of more broadly, our employees internally, and our consumers externally, and kind of most broadly our community at large.
And so you both kind of alluded to a component in all of this that is critically important, and that is social media and kind of the world that we live in, the proliferation of information that happens so quickly. So, what role does social media play in this conversation from your perspective, John or Tristan?
Yeah, I mean, social media. Obviously, when you look at what is the biggest thing that's kind of happened to change, starting with the Arab Revolution or with ISIS, right? The ability to congregate and talk and kind of rapidly communicate is new to all type of revolution, all type of change. And so with being 10 years on the clock here, social media gives a lot of people a voice that otherwise wouldn't have a voice. And you have to think about like what is your curation of that as a consumer, right? And so we think about all the things that we say as a company, right? And we think about all the places those can be read, those can be reshared. So when I think about like what does social media, change from the core perspective, I think we have to be more conscientious about the fact that like our thoughts and our values are being projected further than ever. And they can be digested, reshared quicker than ever. Then on a personal level, I know everyone has their own kind of individual stances on social media and the positives and negatives on it. We have to take it as a net positive, the fact that we can communicate faster and more efficiently and share more information and basically share things that are happening around the globe essentially instantaneously. That is going to be a faster driver of change than any of the tools we've had in the past, through any revolutions that have happened around the world. It's just a different time, and it gives us a bigger opportunity here on the clock.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the way I think about social media is no different from the way I think about brand. Brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is, right? And the thing that I've been so proud of, throughout all these years of running the business, but particularly over the past few months, is that the message that other people talk about Bevel and Walker and Company and what it represents is very consistent to the type of message and the mission that we try to promulgate, right, more broadly. And that's all that matters, right? Like, are we doing the right thing? I think there are a lot of companies and brands that think that they are, right? And then once you read their comments, you realize that they're somewhat mistaken. And again, the proudest moment for me is when they're saying exactly what we are, and that's where the magic happens, where change is really created.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of the things that I advise our clients from an agency standpoint is when you're thinking about the work that we create for them, the creative output that comes out, we are moving away from just focusing on what the message is, whether it's through social media or whatever, and thinking about letting the work be the ad. How are you demonstrating? How are you living in your values, and that being more important than whatever the spot or the commercial is. So I want to come back to you, Tristan, on something because I know you've partnered with Black Lives Matter. You've donated to Know Your Rights Camp. What made you focus on and partner with those organizations? And are there any other organizations that you're free to talk about in terms of?
Oh, there are plenty. We have been pretty busy. And that's the wonderful thing about being a part of a company like my own, right? We have similar lived experiences to the people who are suffering, right? Back in early March, we teamed up with Urban Prep Academy. They're well known for sending they're in Chicago, all their seniors end up going to a 4-year college. COVID hit. What's the first thing that we think about? Well, actually, let me kind of backtrack a little bit. During the All-Star game, right, we kind of announced this partnership with them to kind of fund their kind of college applications, also trips to visit universities, that sort of thing. Once COVID hit, we said, wow, these folks are going to go into virtual continuous learning. Can we actually buy laptops for them, right? Because we want to think very thoughtfully about the disproportionate impact of access, right, to technology, that sort of thing, right? It's based on our own lived experience. We identified it very quickly. We partnered with Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor here in Atlanta. She had a Strength and Beauty Fund, right, where she wanted to provide kind of capital to small businesses who were going under potentially for COVID-19, right? Particularly beauty businesses. COVID-19 is expected they're going to wipe out 50% of Black businesses. I'm a Black business owner myself. I know exactly how that feels, right? So we supported that authentically. Colin, he came to our office, years ago, right, talking about this stuff, and we are authentically kind of committed to his mission. Black Lives Matter is the obvious one. Like, we are so clearly, I think, in line in all that we represent with what they represent. And they're not the only ones, right? I mentioned Headspace a little earlier, and we still have a job to do in like selling product, right? But none of this felt out of scope in any way, and it felt very natural. And we were very quick to act on it as quickly as we identified the solution.
Yeah, and John, I know you've partnered with Community Coalition. So can you tell us a little bit about how that initiative impacts Black business owners and local communities?
Yeah, the Community Coalition is something we're especially proud of. During the height of the pandemic, I think everyone was thinking about themselves, and kind of how this came about is, as a business where people have to physically come into one of the retail stores, when we were forced to close the stores and basically lock the door due to the law. Like, the level of frustration was something that we'd almost never felt before. It was like, hey, you start this business, you have the ability to earn, et cetera, and whether or not you want to take the risk, it's really not up to you because we're all closing. And so, as we were kind of lamenting with the businesses on to our left and to our right, it became quickly clear that the restaurants were in a whole different kind of level of problem than what we had, right? Like, we had the ability to at least sell online and use some customer goodwill, barring some delivery. It was just awful, right? It was awful. And like where we're sitting now, we had a restaurant downstairs, near all of our showrooms, places you could walk to. So what we did with Community Coalition was, we said, all right, we'll take basically a restaurant that you can, you can drive to in a 30-mile radius. Just start calling, literally in the phone book, use Yelp. And anyone that wants to do a gift card share, we'll do it with them, and we'll flow them 3x the dollars that we take ourselves. So you sell a $300 gift card, right? And that will get you $500 at our business and $200, at a local restaurant. And then we wire them 200 of the 300. So it was this platform that we used our kind of our customer goodwill on and relationships. And we said, hey, we want to do this to anyone who's interested, right? To any restaurant who wants to work with us, like, we will happily work with you. And so, literally, through the process of cold calling people down the street, I think we were able to sign up over 40 restaurants with the lens of this solvency, right? Like, we want to help keep these restaurants solvent because they help support the neighborhood, jobs, community, everything from delivery into chefs, into cooks, into owners. And so we were especially proud of that because that kind of came out of our own, brain trust. It was a way to kind of flow our tech platform to folks that didn't have the opportunity to do it. So it was a great initiative, and something that we'll run again here in future years.
Yeah. No, and I think what you both said really demonstrates this notion that I was spending a lot of time thinking about, and that is the spending your privilege, right? We're all privileged in different ways. How are we spending that privilege in a way that is impactful? So, last question for both of you. So we are in a strenuous time in our country. We're going into elections next week. Obviously, the end of the year. It's been a long 67 months of 2020. So, wondering what your takeaways are and what your call to actions would be for other CEOs and other leaders as we wrap up the year.
So mine and Tristan, I'll go first on this. My thought as we wrap up the year, and kind of specifically on the inequality and the conversation at hand, is, I think, be really conscious, like, as a business, of like what muscle you have that can make the biggest impact. I think a lot of people have tried to take really big bites out of the apple and say, we're going to go do this and we're going to help solve that. I think it's like, spend a little bit of introspective time to develop a plan that basically leverages, like, what do you do best as a business, and where can you make an outsized impact based upon the business model you've built, and then execute that with consistency, till infinity, right? And that's what we're talking about as a business. So for us, that means, like, we make clothing every day. We live to make clothing, to donate clothing, and do it and change the trajectory of someone's life, to give them confidence, to help them kind of build that chapter of their career, job interviewing, you name it. So we're being conscious of our own muscle here at Not Standard. I'd say for other CEOs, like, what your muscle is, how can you use it and be consistent? And I think with that as a takeaway, I think we can make a lot of progress here.
Yeah, I think what's required is our checking our own privilege. I have to remind myself every single day that I am a Stanford MBA graduate. I've raised tens of millions of dollars to start my company. I sold to Procter & Gamble. I sit on 2 public company boards. I went to a boarding school for high school on full scholarship. In spite of all of my humble beginnings as a kid from Queens, right? I've gotten to a point of privilege, right? So it's important that I have to check myself every single day. There are people suffering, right? There are people suffering in ways that I could not understand right now. But it's my duty to try. And I think the next generation of leaders have to optimize empathy. I think that there is a strength in vulnerability that we're starting to see right now from CEOs that just even a year ago you probably wouldn't have seen as prominently. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a necessary thing. And I think the CEOs that do not check that privilege and do not learn to be empaths in that way will fail. And those companies will regret it. Those employees will regret it. And I have to ensure that, and most importantly, it's not just the CEO. That CEO has to set up an activity system in their companies to ensure that he or she or they are checked, right? And even I have to say that as a Black man too, right? Because privilege, right, kind of crosses so many different ways, right? But I think that is a catalytic solution for at least this next period of time.
Absolutely. Check and spend your privilege appropriately. So, gentlemen, we're at time. Time flies when we're having fun. So, John Belay, CEO of Not Standard, Tristan Walker, CEO and founder of Walker and Company in Bevel. Thank you so much for this conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And let's continue the momentum as we wrap up the year. Again, thank you to News One and 100 Black Men for creating the space for us to have this conversation. And we'll see you next time. Be well.
Thanks, Jason.